I had just started loading groceries into my car when this teenage boy, maybe 16 or 17, swaggered toward me like he owned the entire parking lot. He didn't bother with a greeting. Instead, he jabbed a finger at my grocery bags and said, completely serious, "Give me those. My mom runs this neighborhood, and she says I can take whatever I need." I actually laughed, thinking it had to be some kind of prank, but the kid's expression didn't budge. "I'm not joking," he added, crossing his arms with all the confidence of someone who had never been told no in his life. "You don't want to mess with my mom. She's the HOA president, and she can make your life miserable." I shook my head, told him no, and went right back to loading my trunk. He spun around dramatically, stomped off, and pulled out his phone, muttering something about how I'd regret this. About 10 minutes later, just as I was about to pull out of my parking space, a patrol car rolled up behind me, lights flashing. The officer, who stepped out already, looked apologetic before he even opened his mouth. "Sir, I need to ask you a few questions. We received a call about aggressive behavior and intimidation of a minor in this parking lot." I raised an eyebrow, set down my last grocery bag, and reached into my jacket. The moment my badge appeared, the officer's entire demeanor shifted. "Chief Morrison," he said, clearly caught off guard. "Yes, Officer Daniels," I replied calmly. "Now, did that report happen to mention anything about what led to this so-called intimidation?" He checked his notebook and slowly shook his head. "The report says you threatened a teenager named Tyler Peaton after he asked you for help." I couldn't help smiling at the creative rewrite of the truth. I explained what had actually happened, and with every detail I gave, Officer Daniels looked more and more uncomfortable. I pointed out that the market had security cameras, and at least 3 shoppers had witnessed the entire exchange. "Let me guess," I added. "The caller was Patricia Peatson, HOA president of Maplewood Estates." Officer Daniels nodded. "She insisted we respond immediately. Said you were dangerous." I sighed, already knowing how this would unfold. Patricia Peaton, better known as Karen to most of the neighborhood, had been wielding her HOA title like a personal weapon for the past 2 years. But calling the police with a fabricated emergency? That was a new low even for her. "Follow me to the station," I told Officer Daniels. "We need to document this properly." But before we went, I had another stop to make. The HOA clubhouse was barely 5 minutes away, and I knew Patricia was probably inside right now, drafting some new, absurd rule about grocery store conduct. And sure enough, her silver Lexus was parked diagonally across 2 spaces as usual. Inside, she was holding court with 2 board members, speaking in that nasal tone capable of stripping paint off a wall. "And that's why we need stricter rules about who can shop at our local stores," she was saying. "We can't have just anyone from outside neighborhoods coming in and causing problems." The moment she spotted me, she stood up with a triumphant smirk. "There he is. Officers, arrest this man immediately. He threatened my poor Tyler." But her little victory pose didn't last long. Officer Daniels stepped in behind me and addressed me formally. "Chief Morrison reviewed the market security footage. It clearly shows the minor approaching you and making the demands." Patricia's smug smile collapsed into confusion, then into something that looked like a balloon losing air. "Chief," she repeated weakly. "That's correct, Mrs. Peaton," I said, keeping my tone professional despite the satisfaction humming in my chest. "I'm Police Chief James Morrison, and your son didn't ask for help. He demanded my groceries because," and I quote, "his mom runs this neighborhood." The other board members exchanged uneasy looks as I continued. "Furthermore, you called 911 and filed a false report claiming I threatened your son, even though witnesses and video evidence show the opposite. Your son attempted to intimidate and essentially extort a stranger in a parking lot." Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. But Tyler said." "Tyler lied," I said plainly. "And you weaponized emergency services based on that lie without verifying a single detail. Do you understand how serious it is to file a false police report?" The room went dead silent except for the low hum of the air conditioner. One of the board members, Robert Sullivan, the most reasonable of the bunch, cleared his throat. "Patricia, is this true?" Did you really call the police without checking what actually happened? She snapped toward Robert with her usual venom. Robert, you don't understand. This man was, but I cut her off before she could twist the story any further. Mrs. Peaton, I suggest you stop talking before you make this even worse for yourself. Officer Daniels, please read Mrs. Peaton her rights and issue a formal warning for filing a false report. I'll be recommending the district attorney's office review this for potential charges. The color drained from Patricia's face as Officer Daniels began reciting the familiar words. When he finished, I continued, as for your son, Tyler will be referred to juvenile services for attempted intimidation and extortion. The market is also considering banning him from the premises. Patricia collapsed into her chair, finally beginning to understand the gravity of what she'd done. But I wasn't finished, Mr. Sullivan, I said, turning to the board member. I'll be filing a formal complaint with the HOA regarding Mrs. Peaton's abuse of power. She used her title in an attempt to have me arrested on fabricated charges. I believe that warrants an emergency board meeting, don't you? Robert nodded immediately. Absolutely. This is completely unacceptable. The following days moved quickly. The HOA board held its emergency session, and I attended to present the full account. The market manager supplied the security footage, which clearly showed Tyler approaching me aggressively, demanding my groceries, and me calmly declining before he stormed away. 3 witnesses provided written statements backing up my version word for word. Patricia tried to defend herself, insisting she was just protecting her son, but the evidence stacked against her was overwhelming. The board voted unanimously to remove her as president effective immediately. She was barred from holding any HOA position for 5 years, but her legal troubles were only beginning. The district attorney chose to pursue charges for filing a false police report, a misdemeanor carrying up to 6 months in jail, and a $5,000 fine. Patricia hired an expensive attorney, but the evidence was undeniable. She had called 911, claimed I threatened her son, and demanded my immediate arrest, all based on a lie. Tyler, meanwhile, was sentenced to 40 hours of community service and ordered to attend a juvenile diversion program. The judge made it clear that his entitled behavior learned directly from his mother would not be tolerated. 3 months later, at Patricia's sentencing hearing, the judge was particularly unforgiving. Mrs. Peaton, he said sternly, you didn't simply waste police resources. You attempted to weaponize law enforcement against an innocent man, who happens to be the chief of police, who swore to protect this community. Your actions demonstrate a dangerous disregard for the truth and a blatant abuse of whatever small authority you believed you had. The courtroom was filled with neighbors from Maplewood Estates, many of whom had suffered under Patricia's tyrannical HOA leadership. I noticed several nodding in agreement as the judge spoke. Furthermore, the judge continued, flipping through documents, the court has reviewed your history of HOA complaints and citations. 37 complaints in 2 years, Mrs. Peaton. Fines for grass being 1/4 inch too long. Fines for curtains in the wrong shade of beige. A fine was imposed because a child's bicycle was left in a driveway for 15 minutes. You fostered a climate of fear and intimidation in your community, and it culminated in this criminal act. Patricia's lawyer attempted to object, but the judge waved dismissively. Your client's pattern of behavior is relevant to sentencing, counselor. The prosecutor rose to add even more damning context. Your Honor, we also discovered that Mrs. Peaton told her son he had the right to take whatever he wanted from anyone in the neighborhood because of her position. Several residents have reported similar incidents involving Tyler, though this was the first time it escalated to attempted extortion. From the defendant's table, Patricia glared at me with pure hatred, as if all of this were somehow my fault. Her perfectly styled hair was slightly frizzy. Her designer suit rumpled the most unkempt I had ever seen her. The state recommends the maximum sentence, the prosecutor concluded. The judge nodded thoughtfully, then delivered his ruling. Patricia Peaton, I hereby sentence you to 90 days in county jail, with 60 days suspended pending successful completion of probation. You will serve 30 days, beginning immediately. Additionally, you are sentenced to 2 years of supervised probation. 300 hours of community service to be completed at local food banks and homeless shelters, and a fine of $5,000 plus court costs. The courtroom erupted into astonished whispers. Patricia's face cycled from red to pale to an almost purplish hue. "But Your Honor," her lawyer pleaded, "my client has never been in trouble before. She's a mother, a homeowner, pillar of the community." The judge's expression hardened. "A pillar who used her position to terrorize her neighbors and teach her son that he was above the law. The 30 days of jail time are non-negotiable. Bailiff, take Mrs. Peaton into custody." As the bailiff approached with handcuffs, Patricia lost the last shred of her composure. "This is insane," she shrieked. "Do you know who I am? I'm the HOA president. I keep property values up. I maintain standards. You can't do this to me." The judge slammed his gavel. "Former HOA president, Mrs. Peaton, and I just